It's been 10 years, going on 11. This December will make 11 years. And sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday. When I hear people now say they've experienced loss, my heart just goes back to that place. And I'm just like, I'm overwhelmed with emotions for them because I know that feeling. Some days I'm completely fine to talk about it. And there are sometimes where I'm right back on the living room floor crying like it happened yesterday. When you put women at risk to get health care, you are risking their lives. Remember, you're not alone. There is always somebody who has gone through what you're experiencing right in this moment. Reach out to someone and get help.
These are the stories that need to be heard. These are the stories that need to be brought in front of the world to see. It's just not a one-off situation. This is why I'm so passionate about it. Hi, and welcome to another episode, another season of Woman Witness Podcast, The Stories at the Well. I'm your host, Leah Fortier. Here on this platform, we bring to you voices of women that are out there making a positive difference in their lives, in their community, in the world around them. Today, I have another very special topic and a very special guest. And we are going to touch on a lot of different topics today and a lot of different subjects. So I believe that each and every one of us has a story, and you would be surprised to find out how many women are walking down the same path as you. Sometimes we walk through this world and we feel that we're alone. We feel that we are suffering in silence. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with chronic illnesses that no one is aware of. But I would be I would be very remiss to know that there are many people who are walking down the same path and down the same journey as me. And in this episode today, I'm going to introduce you to my guest, Verkeya Holman. Verkeya, welcome to the well. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty okay today. Today is a pretty okay day.
Well, listen, okay is better than nothing, okay? It could be better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It could be a lot worse.
Yes, absolutely. Verkeya, we were chatting before we pressed play. We were like, hold on a minute, we have got to go ahead and press record because we are dropping some really good nuggets, and we need all of our ladies to lean in and jump into this conversation. So,
Absolutely.
let me just start by asking you, can you share with us a little bit? You mentioned in your inquiry form that you are a lupus warrior.
Yes.
And many people don't know that what lupus looks like. What is this? So I want you to talk to us a little bit about your journey with
Okay.
lupus and your journey altogether and becoming an advocate.
So I in 2010 got married, and 6 months after, well, I shouldn't even say 6 months, right when we got home from our wedding, because we got married in Maryland, we came home to New York, and I had started having symptoms of lupus. I was having serious joint pain, which I had off and on my whole life, but it became so severe that, like, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't walk sometimes. And at that time, I was a marathon runner. So this was causing some serious scares for me. And then I started getting migraines so bad that, like, I literally would not be able to get out of bed some mornings, living in the dark, literally. And 6 months after I had gotten married, I ended up in the hospital. They were doing spinal taps, trying to figure it out. I eventually did get diagnosed the following year, but it was because I had my first miscarriage. So I had gone to see my neurologist, and she was like, "What's been going on?" And my ex-husband was like, "Tell her everything." So I was like, "Well, I had a miscarriage." And she was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry." She was like, "I have another patient who has similar symptoms, and she also had a miscarriage. Would you go to the lab right now? I think I have an idea as to what's going on." She was like, "Do you know what lupus is?" And of course, I had no idea. And so I went to the lab, and sure enough, I had what they call a positive ANA. So the journey was rough because I had not a lot of knowledge about it. And I kind of brushed the diagnosis off because when I started hearing stories of other lupus warriors, it didn't look like mine because
Mm,
it impacts everybody differently.
yeah.
So I was just like, I'm not that sick.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a really good friend of mine almost died that it made me wake up and say, listen, you need to
This
start
is
paying
serious.
attention.
Yeah.
And so that was my introduction to the Lupus Foundation of America. We did the walk that first year, and we've been doing it ever since. I have since become an advocate with LFA. I am a part of the Walk to End Lupus Now committee. I've gone 2 years in a row to DC to lobby for different bills that would impact lupus warriors. And I'm also a part of the Lupus Research Action Network, and we encourage people, specifically women of color, because lupus impacts us the most, Black women in particular. And we encourage people to participate in research studies because if we don't participate in the research studies, then they can't create medications that will help us. So, and I understand the history of Black folks and research studies in America, and I get it. However, we have to change that narrative and be a part of the solutions. So, yeah.
Let me ask you, and thank you for sharing that, Verkeya. And I couldn't agree more with you. I have a really good friend of mine who's battling lupus, and I think because so many people are ignorant to what lupus is, what it looks like, and some of the symptoms and how it affects each person differently. What have you and your organization done to start educating these communities and people?
So, with the Lupus Foundation of America, as an advocate, I'm often called to be on panels to talk about what lupus is, how it's impacting me specifically, and just my story. In my own, I have a nonprofit organization of my own called Verkeya Speaks Inc., and we often are doing things around chronic illness and sharing those stories as well. So there have been times that, of course, May is Lupus Awareness Month. So during that month, then I will invite guests on Instagram and do a live or Facebook, and then talk about their stories and just share information. That's the biggest way that I advocate in both, the foundation that I work with and then in my own nonprofit. So it's one of those things where any chance I get, I share. So even if people ask me questions on the street, like sometimes random conversations happens and it comes up and then I'll share information. People often contact me directly because they know I live with lupus to ask for information if they know people who are struggling. And I'm always open to having conversation with folks, because I think how else are we going to learn if we don't talk about it?
That's what's up. That's what it's all about, being a witness. Let me ask you. Now, you mentioned briefly that you went through your first loss, your miscarriage. Can you talk to us about that profound loss, including? I know you mentioned in your inquiry form, child loss and infertility. How did you cope with these painful experiences, and what advice would you give to others going through similar journeys?
So I had my first miscarriage, which led to my lupus diagnosis. My doctor at the time, my OB/GYN, said to me, listen, if you don't get pregnant in 6 months, you need to come back because then we need to figure out what's going on. I didn't get pregnant in 6 months. I went back. Um, we actually had to do a battery of tests. She was like, I think you need to go see this. They call it a reproductive endocrinologist, but it's a fertility doctor. So I went to see him, and he was like, you need to have these fibroids removed before we do anything because I don't want the fibroids to grow while you're pregnant. So I had to get a myomectomy, which is a removal of fibroids, even before I could start the fertility process. And because of the way insurance works, you have to do what they call 3 to 4 rounds of intrauterine insemination, or IUI, which is when they basically take a sperm, whomever it is, whether it's a donor or your partner, and they insert it directly into your uterus once you've kind of like been on medication and all your ovaries are revved up and all the eggs are to the surface of the ovaries. I went through that 3 times. The last time I got pregnant, but that was my second miscarriage.
Mm.
So that was like, what did I do wrong? God, what part of the game is this? How can I be a true wife to my husband if I can't give him children? I knew nobody personally who was going through fertility journeys at that time. It was
Yeah.
very isolating. I had nobody to talk to. I was on all these hormones. I was an emotional wreck on the roller coaster of things.
Yeah.
And after that second miscarriage and third cycle of IUI, my reproductive endocrinologist was like, do you want to do the fourth round or do you want to go to IVF? I said, we going straight to IVF. I'm not doing this again. So we
Yeah.
went to IVF. We did the whole medication, egg retrieval, everything was all done. We
Mm.
went to get my eggs inserted back, and sure enough, he put 2 eggs back. He said, listen, don't get excited. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
One of the eggs didn't survive, but we were pregnant. And I went through 27 weeks of pregnancy only to have a stillborn.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like the night before the night before I came home from work and I wasn't feeling so great. But I suffer from migraines. I had a migraine. I laid down. The next morning, my head was pounding. I called my mother. She said, call the doctor's office. I called the doctor's office. The nurse said, drink some caffeine, relax. If it gets worse, come in. But I think the problem with saying stuff like that to somebody with chronic illness, when you're in constant pain, your threshold is super high. So, you know, when I went, finally, my body started labor. There's no other way to say it. And my back was killing me and everything. And my ex husband was like, we need to go to I said, we need to go to the hospital. I can't get comfortable. And I felt nauseous. And it was just like, nope, something. I'm like, and at the time, I just thought I was going into early labor. But when we got there was no heartbeat. When I tell you, the whole world felt like it was ending. It's no other way to say that. Um, it's been 10 years, going on 11. This December will make 11 years. And sometimes it feels like it was just yesterday. Um,
Mm.
I don't ever, when I hear people now say they've experienced loss,
Yeah.
my heart just goes back to that place. And I'm just like, I, I'm overwhelmed with emotions for them because I know that feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and what I would tell people, if you're going through chronic illness or fertility treatments or child loss or miscarriage, any kind of loss, whether it's your mother, your father, your sister, your cousin, because everything, relationships are different for people, right? And
Right.
depending on a relationship, it can make you just be like, I can't even understand what's happening. My best advice is get help as soon as possible.
Mm.
Go seek therapy, I remember when we finally came home from the hospital, I remember being on my living room floor crying so hard and trying to call. I had reached, so I am a social worker by trade. I know a lot of therapists, obviously. Um, I called a former professor of mine and asked for some referrals. He was like traveling, so he didn't get back to me. But I had to go through, this is why you don't throw things away, right? I had I went through some of my old papers to find my grief, loss, and bereavement professor's name because I knew he would be the person to either give me a referral or help himself. And I remember crying so hard as I left that message that I was unsure that he would even understand what I was saying. Um, when he did call me back, he said, "Come in, we'll meet, and I'll decide whether I'll pass you off to someone else or I'll keep you as my own." And when I tell you it was the best thing ever for him to keep me this quiet. He was the antithesis of everything I was. He was a man, he was white, he was Jewish, he
Yeah.
was old enough to be my father. I mean, I had a few years on his children,
Yeah.
but we had the best working relationship.
Yeah.
And don't discount that somebody that doesn't look like you can't understand or can't help you
Yeah.
through what you're dealing with. You don't
Yeah.
know who God is going to send you to get you out of the mud. You
Yes.
know? And so, loss is something that I've experienced on so many occasions. Um, family members and things of that nature. But losing a child, I would imagine, is probably akin to losing your parent, particularly your mother,
Oh,
because there's a specific connection that parents and children share that nobody else can really understand.
yeah.
My ex-husband had his own grief and loss and reactions to the loss of our child. However, very different because I carried that baby in my womb. So seek help. Don't stay quiet. My family is not a family of talkers. Um, but that particular incident forced us to have conversations that we were not having.
I like that. How did you approach that?
So I would say that things kind of sometimes happened organically, or
Okay.
sometimes people would ask how I was doing, and I was just like, today's
Okay.
not a good day. And it also happened because hearing how other people learned about what happened,
Through hearsay?
not necessarily through hearsay, but like my mom called my aunt and such, and my cousins heard it from their mother. And then it was just like, my
Somebody
cousin,
call me?
and it just, every time you think you've told the last person, somebody goes, "How's the baby?" Like, nigga,
Uh,
how's the baby? Right?
yeah.
You become a comfort to other people at times, which is rough because you're still trying to manage your own emotions and feelings. Some days I'm completely fine to talk about it, and there are sometimes where I'm right back on the living room floor crying like it happened yesterday. The blessing in all of this is my rainbow baby, who is 9 years old and driving me crazy, and I love him. I mean, hold on to your faith,
Yeah.
hold on to hope. There was a point during this process where my mom was like, "Don't you think you should just try to adopt?" Woman, what?
What?
First of all, I told you I'm a social worker by trade.
Yeah.
I am not Angelina Jolie. I can't just go to another country and adopt somebody's child. And
Yeah.
even if I could, I wouldn't, because sometimes those situations are very difficult because of the traumas that children experience prior to them coming to you, whether they're from another country or whether they're from right here in the United States.
Mhm.
And I knew from my work history that wasn't something I was willing to go through. And I knew I would have to go through fostering a child before adopting. And that can be also a emotional roller coaster because why? People, the goal is always what they call return to parent. So if the parent gets themselves together, then the kid goes home.
Right.
So I didn't want to go through those motions, but
Right. Getting attached and
and
yeah.
I'm a lovey huggy person, and
Right.
so nope.
Can I ask you, Verkeya, and I'm trying to think of the best way to approach this question, especially with what's going on in nowadays, right? Your loss was over, like you said, 10 years ago. And I believe 10 years ago, I'm not sure of the exact dates. I don't think this whole issue with a woman's choice was a deal. Uh-oh, Verkeya. If you feel like answering, I would
Oh, I
love
can
your
answer because
I would
sis is
love your
angry.
I would love your opinion on that, because being in your situation,
Yeah, yeah.
talk to me how important it is for a woman to have a
So
choice.
let me also put this caveat in. My mama is a nurse, and
Okay.
my mom has worked in maternal health for forever at this point. Like it's been so long, I've stopped counting. Um, Over 20 something years of working in maternal health. What people do not understand, right, is that the procedure that is called a dilation and curettage, which is the procedure that they for abortions. It's the same procedure that is used if you have a miscarriage. So, if those things don't happen, a woman could get sepsis. She could die. Like, so what people don't understand is that, God forbid, someone has an ectopic pregnancy or a miscarriage, you have to have what they call the dilation and curettage. I knew what a dilation and curettage was because of the early work that I had done in my career, and I knew that was what an abortion was. However, I didn't realize until I had one for myself, my first miscarriage, that was the same term that was used. Had no idea. When you put women at risk to get health care where they are getting sterile, clean places to go to get treatment, when you take those things away, you are risking their lives. So, whether it's an abortion or whether it's a pregnancy that has been lost, anything of that nature, it's just horrible to have to go back to that. And
Mhm.
I watched so many movies and had so many conversations with people around, having procedures. And I always, I'm just going to be honest. I know people personally who've had abortions for various different reasons.
Right.
And as a friend, you just support them through it,
You
right?
just
Like, that's it. Because you're my friend and I love you. And whatever choices you're making, I'm going to be there so that you can get through this. And anybody who does that is is not doing it just all willy-nilly. Like,
no. Yes.
it's an emotional thing to have to do that. It's a procedure. It may only be a day procedure, but it's a procedure, and it's such a personal.
Such a personal.
It's
Yeah.
so personal for each person, right? And I'm gonna be honest, my dilation and curettage was the most traumatic experience ever. Um,
Mm.
the lady was telling me, the doctor was telling me not to cry,
Um,
and I was like, I just lost my baby. You don't want me to cry? Your body is shaking. I have to be. And I'm like, I remember calling the hospital to complain because it was horrible. And I think that we have to be careful to be so judgmental.
That's it, Verkeya.
That's all. Because you never know what your life is going to produce for you to have to make hard and fast decisions.
Life-threatening decisions.
That part. That part. Because, I mean, in all reality, it could have been two dilation and clitorises based on the fact that I had a second miscarriage. The only reason why it wasn't was because the doctor, my reproductive endocrinologist, was like, I don't want to do that, not unless we absolutely have to. So we're going to do the oral medication, and if everything is clear, then we won't do it. But if they don't clear everything out, or everything isn't, your body doesn't flush automatically, they have to clear that out, because when you do try to conceive, it could create more issues, and that's not healthy for anybody, right? Like
You
life
start
threatening decisions.
right. Oh, Verkeya, thank you for answering that. And I know that that's a touchy topic. No one wants to talk about it. And but
But
I'm
if we don't talk about it, how are we going to get?
how are we going? A hundred
We have to talk about these things, and Black folks in particular, right? Because we've been raised, don't be talking about your business outside the house.
yeah, yeah.
Stop that.
Stop it.
People need help, and we
Yeah,
can't help if we don't witness.
that's it. Oh, that is it right there, Verkeya. And I'm interested. These are the stories that need to be heard. These are the stories that need to be brought in front of the world to see. It's just not a one-off situation. This is why I'm so passionate about it. And I didn't even know this is where our conversation was going to go today. I told you this at the
Right,
beginning.
because you never know where God is
You
leading
never
you.
know. You never
Never.
know. And I love what you said. And that's the thing that I'm just trying to keep forefront in my mind, and with everything that I do, is take my judgment out of it. Facts speak for themselves, and let people make their own decision. I don't think that Christ did not come in this world. He didn't give us all his life for us to go around pointing fingers at each other, but just to love one another and be a witness. So I love that, love that. And I love the nuggets that you dropped today. Verkeya, I want to ask you, you have your nonprofit. For those who are listening, before I ask you this, I want to ask you one more thing. You mentioned that you had to keep faith to keep up your resiliency. So how did your faith in God help you through these different traumatic experiences in your life?
Whew. So I always start conversations about God like this. God and I have a very complicated relationship. I was raised in church. I was baptized as a child, but the relationship did not become a relationship until much later. Um, I was so angry at God, and it took a lot of therapy to say, I'm angry at God. I honestly and truly had to heal my relationship with God, because the faith through the process waxed and waned, right? Like there were days where I'm like, this is going to all work out. I believe, I believe, I believe. But the scripture that always comes back to me is, I believe, now help my unbelief.
Come on.
And I believe that scripture was tailor made for me, because I believe, but help my unbelief. The belief that through this process, you're going to grant me the child that I'm supposed to raise, that I'm supposed to have. And we also come from this place of, I praise to God, but I'm gonna do this anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
hello, I
Now,
see you all the signs, walk away, but we wanna put it together ourselves and make a mess of it, right? And so I say that because I had no idea that I would be raising my son in a single parent family household. My husband at the time is no longer my husband. We are actively co-parenting. But I had no idea he would not be living here through the years of my child growing up.
Yeah.
And so the picture that we create for ourselves and paint for ourselves may not be what God has. And so
Mm.
whatever's coming next got to be better than what it is right now.
Come on. You said your latter days will be better.
Right. And so even now is, I believe, now help my unbelief, because I can't see it. Right. And so, walking by faith and not by sight is hard. We want to see it to believe it. That's just how the human makeup is. But one thing I've also learned is that when you can't pray for yourself and when you lose faith, there are a bunch of people in your life that you need to be able to tap into and say, "Hey, today ain't the day. I need you to do it. I cannot." And I believe that my parents, my grandfather, my aunts, my uncles, all of those lovely, beautiful folks at my home church are constantly praying for me, even now. And my friends, the relationships that I've created on my own, I can call friends and say, "Hey, I need you to pray. It's a tough time right now." And that for me is how you walk this faith journey, because you can't do it by yourself either. It's not meant to be walked alone. You need encouragement along the way, because you're going to fall by the wayside. You're going to fall back a few pegs, right? Like, you could create a whole plan and God is like, bam, now what you going to do? You going to believe? Right? Like, I prayed through the process of going back to school, and I've kind of kept that on the low, but I don't even care anymore. But this summer I had an awful experience in one of my classes, and I almost quit school.
Oh,
And my dean was like, "I'm not gonna let you quit. I'm sorry." Like, what?
come on. Who are
She's
you?
like, "You sound like you're a woman of faith to me. So we gonna quit or we gonna keep going?" But I also understand God will send you who you need. And my cohort of classmates is so supportive. And so I'm going to pray my way through this degree. But we have to pray specifically.
Yes, ask for what you want.
Ask specifically what you need. And I remember the first time I heard that in church, and I was like, "Pray specifically? What you talking about?" But you have to be specific. "God, I need you to send me somebody who can proofread my papers and make sure that my APA is on point before I hand it in. God, I would like to have a child with someone who is going to be nurturing and loving and caring, who is going to walk this journey with me. God, I would like to have the relationship with my significant other to improve in this way specifically. I want to be able to co parent effectively from now until this child is 18 years old and beyond, because I don't care how old they get, they're still your kids." But you have to pray specifically.
I like that. I love, and you're right. You do. You have to ask for what you want and don't feel bad about it. Okay. Let me ask you, where can we, if we have someone listening right now and they want to find your nonprofit organization and they want to pour into it, they want to volunteer to help, how can they find you and connect with you?
So, Verkeya Speaks Inc. is a local New York City nonprofit. We support women in the 5 boroughs, specifically women of color, in various different ways. We have our website, verkeyaspeaks.com. We also have, you can hit me up on Instagram at any time at Verkeya_speaks. And we're on Instagram, Verkeya Speaks. I'm everywhere. If you type my name, my first name in Google, Verkeya Speaks will pop up. So people can contact me in various ways. We do have scholarships for young women of color who are graduating from high school, going to college or vocational training in the 5 boroughs of New York City every year. And so that's always exciting. So we're always fundraising for that. Like I said, we have been doing different workshop series here and there. Hopefully this year, we're in a regrouping year, I'd like to call it,
Okay.
trying to regroup, refocus, and move forward. So that's where we are this year. And our summer is ending. We always take summer off, but we will begin things starting September on Labor Day. We will be back in business. And so that's the way you can contact us and support us. We're on LinkedIn as well, and we're out here. We're
Perfect.
out in the corner of the world.
Yeah, perfect. And I will definitely take all Verkeya's information and I will have it in the description below. Verkeya, before we let you go and get you out of here, I want you to leave the ladies and gentlemen who may be listening something to take with them throughout the week.
Remember, you're not alone. There is always somebody who has gone through what you're experiencing right in this moment. Reach out to someone and get help. Is no shame in asking for help. And that's been the hardest thing for me ever to do. Even now, I struggle with that. But there is absolutely no shame in saying, you know what, today I'm not okay and I need some help through this. So just give yourself some grace. Grace. Give yourself grace. And remember, God is always listening if no one else is. And it's okay to be angry at God. I don't care what them old people used to say.
He knows your heart.
You can't be having them feelings. So God can handle anything we throw at him. He's fine.
That's so true. He already know. He know you mad, but he got you. You just don't know what's around the corner.
Exactly.
Let it out. Okay, Verkeya, thank you so
You're
much
so
for coming
welcome.
and being vulnerable and sharing your truth and your story. Like I told you at the beginning, I didn't know which way this was going to go, and it went the way it was supposed to go. Thank
Absolutely.
God for that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, ladies, for tuning in to another episode, another season of Woman Witness podcast, The Stories at the Well. If you were inspired or you were touched by something that was said today, we ask that you share, we ask that you like, follow Verkeya on all social media. All of her information is in the description below. So perhaps you were chosen for such a time as this to write, to tell your story, your truth. Until next time. Bye-bye.